тоже стал не видеть таких живой результат. Нет, это не потому что, а просто потому что я
молоко, хлеб, сметана, кетчуп, салат, сыр.
Now, political strategist Reed Galen and former chair of the New Hampshire Republican Party, Jennifer Horn.
Jennifer,
They are both co-founders of the Lincoln Project, and yeah.
Jennifer, what a long, strange trip
We go
it
way
has
back.
been. Jennifer,
Where the hell are we now?
We go way back. I mean, I still, you know, for people that don't know, Jennifer ran the New Hampshire Republican Party. She was, as the Apostle Paul was a Jew's Jew, Jennifer was a Republican's Republican before her conversion. The bright light that came from Donald Trump. Unfortunately, the negative light. So, Jennifer, talk about it, just how disorienting. It still is, to be somebody that dedicated your entire life to growing the Republican Party in New Hampshire, and now finding yourself looking at a lot of those people like me that you grew up with,
right,
that are completely fine with a guy 1 week before an election calling for his attorney general to arrest his political opponent like he's in Belarus instead of America.
You know, Joe, I remember standing at Fisher Cat Stadium in Manchester, New Hampshire with you not long before the 2016 election, having this conversation about Donald Trump, and you trying to convince me that he was absolutely, positioned to win, and me fighting it and not wanting to believe what you were telling me. It is unbelievable to me to see the Republican nominee for president standing on a stage, conducting himself in the manner that he is, standing up there asking Republican women, suburban women, he's saying, suburban women, please like me. A president who assaults the dignity of women on a daily basis, who assaults the dignity of immigrants and their children on a daily basis, who assaults the dignity of our military. You can go through the list. Suburban women do not need Donald Trump to protect our neighborhoods. That is not an issue that is going to save this campaign. And we see it quite clearly in the movement, in the polling, in a lot of these swing states, where it's not just suburban women who are rejecting Donald Trump now, but it is Republican suburban women who are saying anywhere from 5 to 10% of them in recent polling are choosing Joe Biden over this disgrace of a so-called Republican president.
But Jennifer, how did our party melt down so quickly? How did it go from you and me being in crowds talking about balanced budgets, talking about small government, talking about pushing back on Russia, talking about a strong NATO, talking about a strong Israel?
Yep.
How did it go from that to where we are today? The biggest deficits ever, the biggest debts ever, the biggest federal governments ever, and a pro-Russian president.
It is a total corruption of conservatism and the Republican Party to its core. There is not a single elected Republican left in Washington, D.C. who stands for the principles that you and I used to fight for, Joe, or who in any way stands even just for integrity or character. They have completely sold out to this president. Why is beyond me. There's no future of our country, and that what good Republicans across the country need to do is stand together in this election and completely reject what this president stands for. And from the Lincoln Project's perspective, obviously, we believe the right thing to do is to choose a man who is at his heart a good person, who will put the safety and well-being of our nation and our families above himself. And it should be an easy choice for those people on Election Day. There's no future for a Republican Party that continues to embrace Donald Trump as their leader.
So, Reed, President Trump's closing argument here appears to be, suburban women, please like me because I'm saving your neighborhoods from black and brown people. That's the subtext of what he's saying.
Sure.
This morning, he's saying, hey, if you already voted early, go change your vote if you think you've changed your mind. And now, again, he's writing in all caps that it's all the media. Fake news media all wants to talk about COVID, COVID, COVID. In fact, we're rounding the turn, he says. We objectively are not, as doctor after doctor has told us. So for you at the Lincoln Project, who clearly has gotten under his skin over these last several months, what is your closing argument?
Well, I think, as usual, the president has walked right into the snare that we've set for him, whether or not it was the billboards we put up against Jared and Ivanka last week in Times Square that they immediately reacted to in a way that we could not have been more pleased with, because I'll tell you what it did. It did exactly what we knew it would do, which was it put COVID, it put his family, and it put his failures right back in the middle of this campaign with 7 days to go. And so from our perspective, it should be COVID. We have 220-some thousand people dead in this country, another 7 million sick. Where I live here in Utah, we're now going to start thinking about rationing care. This is what we saw in northern Italy right at the beginning of the pandemic last spring. And so from our perspective, it is about COVID. COVID has changed everything in American life. It's affect the way we work. Millions of people out of work, kids going into school, coming out of school, parents not knowing what to do. I haven't seen my parents since last Thanksgiving. I'm not going to see them this Thanksgiving. And there's more grandparents across the country, tens of millions that are going to feel the same way. So from our perspective, I would say that, yes, it should be about COVID. It will be about COVID, and it won't stop being about COVID until Joe Biden is elected, takes the oath of office, and starts to get this country right back on the path.
Reed, John Heilman's here with a question for you. John?
Hey, Reed, good to see you, man. We talked about this a little bit when I was out there and visited you guys a couple weeks ago, but I think it's good to talk about for as we look kind of, the election's pretty close now, right? And people are starting to set their sights on what happens after, and particularly what happens after with you guys. You've came together with a singular focus, which was to try to get rid of Donald Trump. But it seems on the basis of what we've been reading in Axios this morning and other places that you guys have a longer term ambition now that goes beyond, in terms of advocacy, goes beyond just beating Donald Trump and goes to some larger ideological aims, and also commercially has some greater aims for what your future at Lincoln is. So why don't you talk about both those things? Like, what's life after Trump like for the Lincoln Project?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I think like the rest of us who are dedicated to beating him, we've got 7 more days to go until Election Day, right? And so every last minute of those 7 days is going to be focused on that. I think that when it comes to what we want to do as an organization past Election Day, when Donald Trump is defeated, remember that last December we said that it's defeating Donald Trump and Trumpism. Trumpism isn't going away. It's a virus within the American body politic, within the Republican Party. And there are a lot of adherents to it. There's going to be a lot of folks who will start the 2024 presidential campaign on the Republican side who will use its ugliness and the heat and what I would call depth of the people on the Republican side to try and get that inside straight on the Republican primary. Donald Trump's going to have his own media company. I think from our perspective, it's going to be about serving as a coalition partner to Joe Biden as he tries to get this country back on its feet. It's going to serve as a convener of organizations. I feel like we've had a real opportunity to bring different groups together, whether or not it's conservatives, whether or not it's progressives and liberals. And I think that we need to start the common conversation in this country. And then I think from our perspective, too, we've got to get back to the fundamentals of democracy, a Voting Rights Act, a Civil Rights Act, election security. And if we can do that and start to push back against what I call the Trump, Bannon, Facebook, OANN, Fox News doom loop through different channels, then that's what we're going to do in the next 2, 4, 6, 8 years. This fight's not going to be over anytime soon.
Ever wonder why so many people
so many notes to remember. And let's talk a little bit about memorization and the reasons to do it and reasons not to do it, and of course strategies for overcoming the inherent difficulty of memorization. I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with memorization because, like almost everybody else, I have at times gone on to the stage not fully prepared to play from memory and gotten into trouble with some kind of memory slip. The trauma and the anxiety associated with memory slips is like a sick thing in the piano world. It's a thing we do to ourselves, and unnecessarily so, I think. There was just recently an event, a situation with a well-known pianist who was playing, I think, a Chopin concerto that he'd played 100 times, and he just broke down in the middle of it and couldn't find his place. And of course that became the focal point of the whole concert, and he had to issue a public apology and, cut himself or whatever he did. There's nothing more natural and human than not being able to remember every single detail every single time. And to set ourselves up to do that is, again, I think it's just a little bit sick. Nevertheless, even if you are primarily a collaborative pianist and are not playing from memory all that much, you still need the ability to memorize. A collaborative pianist is still going to have to memorize a few of the more complex measures. There may be a bad page turn, there may be something so busy where you can't look at the score. So we all have to memorize. Here's the basic couple of problems I see that we run into in this area. One is that we don't strategically memorize in order to prepare for what it's going to be like on the stage. We memorize in the practice room, and we have a different level of preparation than what we actually need on the stage. Two is that we don't have enough knowledge of theory and, I would say, improvisation. We'll come back to that later. First, let's talk about memorizing in the practice room and not being ready for the stage. I like to work with 4 types of memories. Now, I don't know if this is neurologically correct, but it works just for me and it works for teaching students. So I list 4 types of memories. Number 1 is the intellectual memory. That's the memory where I know what the notes are. I could tell you things like it's in the key of C minor and it's in this meter and the running notes are 16ths and the harmonic progression is 1 and then 265 and 542 and whatever. Here it modulates to this other key. That's intellectual memory. The ultimate example of intellectual memory would be if you could sit down with some manuscript paper, just, take one of these and sit down without a piano to consult and write out your piece from memory with a pencil. That, of course, would be the ultimate display of intellectual memory. The second type I like to talk about is aural memory. It's the memory of the ear. You know what it sounds like. You can play it in your head walking down the sidewalk. You can have an imaginary iPod version going in your head. Third is motor memory, and that is the subconscious knowledge of the physical motions. You can't necessarily name them. You could not, away from the piano, you couldn't list them, but they are there when you're playing. That's motor memory. And then finally, visual. For those people who have the ability to see, so we're accepting blind pianists here. For those who have sight, cues that they get, whether it is things they need to see on the keyboard or whether they are recalling the appearance of the score in their minds. Now, for the visual memory, I've had some students who relied heavily on that, and they would say, oh yes, I am seeing the score, I'm on page 13 in the upper left corner, and I'm actually getting information from that. My experience, though, is that those pianists are in the minority, and the majority of players are not getting real-time information from a visual memory of the score. I mostly don't do that. Doesn't really work for me. What I'd like to talk about is the relationship between the intellectual and the motor with the aural memory on the side. Okay, so here's what happens in the practice room. Let's take that piece I was just playing. It's the C minor Rachmaninoff prelude. So let's say I'm practicing and I want to play from memory. So what do? I repeat. I play and I play and I play in the practice room, and then at some point I take the score away and try it without the score, and if I make it through, I go, aha, I have memorized it. And then I go out on stage to play, and what happens? Probably it falls apart. The question is why? And here's why. This is what I call the motor memory trap. And it's where, in the safety of the practice room, with no audience, no threat, no accountability, no sense of shame if it doesn't go well, we learn to do it by motor memory. In other words, I'm just sort of checking out and letting my hands go. Don't even really have to think about it, and they just do their thing. And so I assume
Нифига себе.
Ужасно, это уже второй залез в машину. Сейчас еще он третий полезет, блядь. А машина просто сломается самая. Сейчас попробуем мимо их проехать. А вон медвежоночек маленький. О, что творится. Голод какой, а? Вот сейчас залезет. Третий залез, он сыт даже. Ой, блядь, вот маленький медвежоночек. Сейчас попробую проехать мимо них. О, четвертый сюда полез в машину. Представляете, что творится? О, махина какая. Сейчас попробую проехать мимо их. Вон. Сейчас немножко убавим. О, вон еще бегут. О, вон водитель сидит. А если бы на меня так... О, запах идет от этого самого, блин. Вон еще один маленький на подходе. О, встал. Вот это картина, блин. Надо как-то от них... Сейчас на водителя еще встанет. О, ёб твою, о! О, все. Проголодались мишки. Тут это да. Да. О, полез опять. Так и хочет, мне. Вот как сейчас там проехать мимо, мне? А машина сломалась.
Я просто вообще. Офигеть, блин. Нет, ладно. Порвет что-то. Нет, наоборот. Нет, это просто там. Не касается тут рулит. Чё, блин, чё? Что ты там? Бесполезно всегда.
Привет! Добро пожаловать на канал Geekbrains. Здесь мы разбираем самые волнующие темы из мира IT. Мы запускаем новую рубрику «Калейдоскоп профессий в IT-направлении». И первая IT-профессия...
Он про себя так думает.
Looking at where we are with 1 week to go until we count the votes. Advantage Joe Biden, 290 electoral votes in our outlook right now. Takes 270 to win. Dark blue, solid Biden. Light blue, lean Biden. Same. Solid red, solid Trump. Light red, Texas leans Trump a week to election day. That tells you all you need to know about the very different landscape. Where's the president going today? He's going here and here and here. 27 electoral votes that were part of the Trump surprise upset 4 years ago, all lean Joe Biden right now, the president on defense heading into the final days. The Democrats, Joe Biden.
Just be very good yourself. Be a player, but be a player. Even if you are a bad player, be very interesting. For money, yeah. Before avoiding себя, just use. Oh, let's fake yourself. Yourself without money.
Going here. Georgia, one of the toss-up states, hasn't voted Democrat for president since back in the Bill Clinton days. Joe Biden thinks high turnout, young people, African Americans in the suburbs, 2 Senate races. Maybe, just maybe, we can flip Georgia. Later in the week, he's going to go here. Kamala Harris is going here this week. The Democrats trying to expand the map in the final week of the campaign. The president feverishly trying to recreate his map of 4 years ago. That would look like this. But right now, you see how this one is? That was the Trump win. As the moment, Joe Biden advantage as we go into the campaign. The candidates are busy win. As the moment, Joe Biden advantage as we go into the campaign. The candidates are busy on the trail. They're also busy spending. Joe Biden has more money. The Trump campaign still raising money. Brand new campaign closing ads. Watch here how differently the Trump campaign still raising money. brand new campaign closing ads. Watch here how different money the Trump we go into the campaign. The candidates are busy on the trail. They're also busy spending. Joe Biden has more money. The Trump campaign's still raising money. Brand new campaign closing ads. Watch here how different the closing message.
While America's cities burned, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris fanned the flames, refusing to strongly condemn violence.
In Joe Biden's America, we'll all be in danger.
President Trump will keep America safe.
If you support the police, support Donald Trump.
Who we are, what we stand for, and maybe most importantly, who we are going to be. It's all at stake. Characters on the ballot, the character of the country. And this is our opportunity to leave the dark, angry politics of the past 4 years behind us.
Joining me now to discuss the final week, Margie O'Meara, a Democratic pollster with GBAO, and Republican pollster Neil Newhouse. He's the co-founder of Public Opinion Strategies. Margie, we could just look at those ads right there. One is Joe Biden being more optimistic, the Trump campaign raising law and order. 1 week out, you'd have to say advantage Biden when you look at the map and when you look at this. Our national poll of polls, this is the point of the race where I'm almost always saying, forget the national polls. But look at it here. Joe Biden 52, Donald Trump 42. If it stays double digits and if Joe Biden stays above 50%, they are worth watching.
Yes, absolutely. It certainly gives you a sense of what the national picture is, and we're a country that is all voting together for president, even if the Electoral College means some battleground states have a little bit more importance. Now, I think when you look at those closing arguments, you really see an incumbent in trouble looking to motivate what he thinks his base wants to hear. But even on the measure of law and order, we've seen in our polling for Navigator, but I've seen other public polling that shows the same, that Biden has the advantage on law and order, that people are less worried about crime than they are about the coronavirus, that they are about the economy, that they are about how divided we've become, and feeling like this isn't really a good time for the country right now. We need to really come together. And that's the message that Biden is offering in his closing message. It's not what Trump has been offering.
So Neil, we all lived through 2016, so you have to say, let's watch. The president did roar back in 2016, but he's the incumbent president now. He's not the outsider challenger from New York running against a long-established, well-known Democrat in Hillary Clinton. He's now the incumbent president of the United States. Joe Biden is well-established in all that. So look at this polling that came out yesterday from the 3 industrial states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. In Michigan, 51-42 Biden. Wisconsin, 51-44 Biden. Pennsylvania, 51-44 Biden. Not only is Biden leading by a pretty healthy margin, 9-7 and 7, but again, he's above 50. The third-party candidates are not performing as well this cycle as they did last cycle. When you look at that, can Trump really recreate that map, or is it out of reach now?
Well, the statewide polls I've looked at over the last few days or so show the president running maybe 3 to 4 points behind his 16 vote. Obviously, it doesn't bode well, especially with Joe Biden running at or near 50%. He can recreate it, but it's a tightrope. He's got to win Florida, Arizona, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and they're all going to be extraordinarily tight. And it's going to depend on those election day voters and the voters who are voting in person late in the campaign. There's got to be kind of there's a red shift right now in how people are voting, and there has to be a red tide at the end of this campaign in order for him to win this thing. But it's going to be by the skin of his nose if he does.
If Neil talks of a red tide, Margie, if you look at the early voting, it's off the charts. And again, they all count. So just because you vote early, it depends how many people vote late. But the gaps you're seeing in states, the dramatically higher turnout among younger voters. Do you think it's different this time? Democrats invested a lot in early voting last time and said, wow, we got this. And then as Neil noted, I remember getting phone calls during the day on Election Day in 2016 from Democrats saying, uh-oh. They were seeing people coming out of the woodwork in places that surprised them. When you look at the early voting numbers, are you confident or still a little nervous?
I don't think anybody anywhere on the Democratic side is taking anything for granted or being complacent in any way. And the early vote, the partisanship between early vote and election day voting, it didn't have to be this way. It wasn't always this way. The president has made it this way by talking about voting by mail and voting early as somehow not as good as voting on election day, which obviously is not true. And so you see a lot of Democrats voting early in part because of concerns about the coronavirus, in part because people are really motivated to vote on the Democratic side. There was a report of somebody, asking online, how long have you guys been in line, trying to figure out a sense of how the line was moving for an early vote somewhere, and someone shouted, 4 years, right? So you have a lot of Democrats really, excited for this moment. Now, that doesn't mean that can't all flip on a dime when election day comes and you have more Republicans turning out.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Aaron Petit Piano Tutorials. I apologize for being gone from this channel for so long. I ended up moving 3 times in the last year and was never in an environment where I could record tutorials and practice videos and that sort of thing. So now that I'm in my own place now, I should be able to do uploads about once a month with new tutorials, maybe more often if I have some extra time. So the first video I'd like to do, coming back, is something about memory and the importance of memorization of your pieces from the very start of learning them. This principle I'll be addressing is actually so unanimous and can work for almost any instrument, just because it's not specifically a piano technique, but I'm going to be demonstrating with a piano piece because that's my instrument that I can work on. So the idea behind it is to create a kind of a balance of how many times you're looking at the score and playing something, and then how many times you're playing it by memory without looking. So you kind of go back and forth until it evens out and you can recall the visual memory of the score, what it looks like, and also the physical memory of the score, like when you're not looking. So it's basically that you go back and forth, but what you do is you change the number of times you play it by memory after each time you look. So I call this technique the 1-1-1-2-1-3 technique. And here's just a little actual diagram of how this works. So the black numbers are how many times you're looking at the actual score and playing it. And the red numbers are how many times you're repeating it by memory. And you go from left to right here. So you play it once looking, then once by memory, then once looking, then twice by memory, then once looking, and 3 times by memory, and finally one more time looking to sort of solidify it, and then you move on to another part. And so by the time you've gone through that whole process, if you add it all up, 1-1-1-2-1-3-1, you've actually played it 10 times. And about half of those were times that you're doing it by memory. And so that sort of trade back and forth really associates it right away. And what a lot of students
Synchronicity.
Often one part of practicing and mastering a piece is memorizing, and this is often quite uncomfortable and needs lots of effort and concentration, and it's tiresome and even can be boring sometimes. And
нет, этому исхода нету, понимаешь? А вот то, что ты педагогику изучаешь, это уж ты так не думаешь, да? Но есть исход помимо практического, то, что ты получаешь диплом, то есть я вот про себя просвещаю. Нет, я так специально хумлю, гуглю, да. Я не настолько хорошо. I'm not perfect in this world, понимаешь? Yeah, I just knowing about the money. But you know, money they are in the government. The government is always for war, yes. And there is some purification. Yeah, you know, I believe in business model. I believe business is freedom and government is more like childish. It's more for little kids, for children, and for, you know, maybe. Not for men, no. So anyway, on your own. And anyway, perhaps like this, yeah, you're giving money for children and for war. So yes, by the way, and for police, which sometimes mistake. It's not good. had more. Not only for many things. Things that you Some periodicity. So what? What? That's my Ихан понял, ты настал. Нет, да, да, нет, good night. Everybody cry. But studying is good. Yeah, no. Yeah. That people they mean something inside. There is light, Yeah. But this is, it's too dark. Yeah. It's too. Move forward. Continue. Continuation of pedagogy is can be better. Be free. Freedom, yeah, you have to free to kill him. So this is it's just for long term. Yeah, you're great. You're great.
For me, for example, learning Bach was extremely difficult, memorizing the music of Bach. And I felt also when I played, I felt unstable. I couldn't rely on my own skills, and so it was difficult. I discovered a memorizing system that is actually invented by Walter Gieseking. And I have discovered that the method takes your concentration exactly into your own brain and memory. So there is a very close connection with things happening and your own memory. And basically the method looks like you close your eyes and you see an imaginary keyboard and you start to play on this keyboard. But it's not only visual. You hear the sound, you feel how you move the fingers, you feel which fingers you move, how to move your hands, and so on. In the beginning, it could be difficult to create and build this inner instrument. But when you do it continuingly, you can achieve it. And later, for example, for me, how it now works, I sit down, I take the note sheet, and I watch and I see a place, then I imagine it and I play it on this inner instrument, and I can learn and master the music. It's much easier. And the other thing, it needs concentration, but it's very pleasant. After I have done it for a while, I feel like I'm in so good connection with my own self, and it's very easy to express myself. I feel my emotions, things much better, and I can express, I feel very free, and I feel how my brain develops. So I really suggest try this method. It's much easier to learn, to memorize things, and also even these pieces that you have learned before are much easier.